Thank you for joining us for this week's message at Crosswind Church. If you have any questions about this message or about Crosswind Church, please visit us at www.crosswindchurch.net, or you can email us at info@crosswindchurch.net.
Well, good morning. My name is Jeremy, and I am the pastor here at Crosswind Church. I'm so thankful you've joined us. I am especially excited, as Garrett's already told you, because we are right in the middle of not just a sermon series, but a campaign called Be Rich, where we, as Crosswind Church here, are partnering with 64 other churches all over the world to just unleash waves of generosity out into our community. And if you're new to Be Rich, or you're new to our church, or maybe you just missed the last couple weeks, let me kind of fill you in. It all kind of springs out of a couple verses that a guy named Paul wrote to another guy named Timothy, and he said this. He said, "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who so richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good and to be rich in good deeds, and be generous and willing to share." And so we kind of said this whole campaign is about those of us that, although we don't feel rich, by the world standards, we are rich, and so we just wanted to practice being rich for about 3 or 4 weeks in the month of November, and so we're partnering with these other churches to do that. Last week, if you missed, our first kind of call to action for being rich, our first kind of practicing point was to give, to be generous with our finances. And so last week what we asked of everyone that was here is we said, we want you to give spontaneously. You purchase things spontaneously all the time. We wanted you to give spontaneously. We didn't tell you how much up until last week. So last week we said, we want you to give $39.95, and if every man, woman, and child that comes to Crosswind Church does that, we'll raise about $12,000. That was what we said, to be divided evenly. 100% of it is going to go to 3 great nonprofits all throughout Northwest Tennessee. We told you about those 3 nonprofits last week. So what I want to do right now is I'm going to celebrate just real quick what we've given today. As of this morning, we have given, here's the number, $21,308. All of that is going to go to these 3 great nonprofits. Each one's going to get a check right now for a little over $7,000. But if you didn't get a chance to give last week, or you want to be a part of that and be a part of that celebration with us, there's still time. You can go to our church app and give there. Make sure it says Be Rich, or you can write a check. Just write Be Rich in the tagline. You can drop it in the bucket on the way out. That is so super exciting. I got to be honest with you. I was kind of like, okay, God, what are you going to do? $12,000. That's a realistic goal. Y'all were so generous. You just blew it out of the water, like not even close. And I am giddy about it. So today we get to move into kind of our next call to action. And I don't think we could have picked a better Sunday to get to do that for, being the Sunday that follows Veterans Day. As Garrett mentioned, we have so many of our men and women that have served in the armed forces that are our veterans, and we have so many that are in active duty right now. My grandfather was a Navy man who was a sailor. He sailed on destroyers. Jody's grandfather, Jody's father, we have a long line of them in our family. There are so many of you. I'm so thankful for the men and women that are willing to go and sacrifice their time, in many cases sacrifice their lives, to go and to fight for our freedoms and to fight for our rights. And not only that, but they fight for life and for freedom and for rights of people all over the world. And the idea is real simple. It's that we just believe, as Americans, we just believe that your life has value and that you have been given rights, regardless of what country you live in, or regardless of the color of your skin, or regardless of your socioeconomic level. That's just something that we kind of have bought into. It's an American kind of principle, an American value. But what if I were to tell you that value is not uniquely American? Now, it is American. It is an American value. What if I told you that's not where it started? In fact, that value, that idea that life has value intrinsically, it is a principle that doesn't come for us when the United States was formed. It's a principle that comes from Christianity. In fact, it's a uniquely Christian principle. Christians have just always believed that regardless of the color of your skin, or what family you're a part of, or what nation that you're a part of, that you have value because you're made in the image of God, and because people are made in the image of God. But here's the thing. It hasn't always been that way. In fact, if we were to kind of look throughout the history of the world, all around the world, what we've seen is that this principle, that life had value, it hasn't always existed. That God cared about you as a person, that's something that's relatively new. That's something that kind of sprang onto the scene late in the history of the world. So, for instance, the idea that God cares about people just because they're made in His image, that no other world religion had that. In fact, if we were to kind of go back and look at the kind of history of world religions, we would see that many people believed that many gods didn't really care about us, but really just kind of used us as puppets. Humans were just kind of like the toys that the gods kind of played with. And so they would mess with us, and they would come and they would punish us, sometimes indiscriminately, or they would bless us, sometimes indiscriminately, just as they felt or as they kind of felt whim. And so as people dealt with their gods throughout history, the only way or reason they would really deal with them is if they wanted something from them. We want the crops to grow, or we want God to not kind of punish us, or we want our children to be healthy, and so we'll interact with our gods. But this idea that the gods just loved people and just wanted people to benefit, that was not a common principle in the ancient world. To make matters worse, up until recently, slavery wasn't just something that was kind of talked about in the world. It was just something that was kind of accepted in the world. It was expected in the world. The fact that other human beings could belong to other human beings, that has existed throughout the history of the world, and it was something that was accepted. It was just expected to be a part of it. Now here's the thing that I think sometimes we miss. Because what slavery does is it devalues humans that are slaves, but what we miss sometimes is that it devalues all humanity. Because what the ancient world understood was this: you are one or two decisions or one or two events away from being someone else's property yourself. You're just a couple of things happening from becoming a slave in and of yourself. So if the village you're living in is conquered by an invading army, you could end up being their slave. Or if there's a plague or a drought and you end up having to incur some debt to kind of keep functioning as a human being in order to live, then that debt might cause you or your children to be put into slavery. And as a result, life everywhere was devalued because of slavery. And when there is no value to life, then justice doesn't exist. Then taking care of other people, that just doesn't happen. In fact, life is of such little value that whether the person next to you lived or died, it really didn't matter. Whether your children lived or died, it really didn't matter in the ancient world, because life had very little value. In fact, both the Romans and the Greeks had laws on their books that said that if a child was born with a defect, or if a child was born with some kind of birth condition, that they were to be killed, because they would be a drain on society. In some cases, they would be murdered directly. In other cases, they'd be left out in the elements to be exposed to the elements, where they were either exposure or wild animals would destroy these babies. There was of no value to humanity. And so the idea of like helping someone, the idea of like having compassion on someone, that just didn't happen in the ancient world. The idea of life being valued or people having value, that didn't exist. That wasn't even a thought in the ancient world at all. In fact, the only way that I would help you is if I felt like there was some way you might be able to help me, or if there was some way that you might help me survive, then I might invest in you. But it was survival of the fittest. It was, I'm trying to get my food so that I can live, and I don't really care what happens to everyone else. And then Jesus shows up, and he starts turning that system upside down. He says some things like, blessed are the meek. Blessed are the peacemakers. Someone strikes you on the cheek, turn to the other one. And if somebody asks you to walk with a mile, you go the extra mile. Like if someone, and Jesus starts making these statements, and it just didn't make sense. It was so foreign, this principle, this idea. And Jesus just taught, listen, the reason you have value is not because of the nation you were born into. It's not because of your last name. It's not because of your heritage or your bank account or the color of your skin. The reason you have value is because you were made in the image of God. And then he makes this statement. Maybe his most famous sermon ever. In Matthew chapter 5, he says this: give to the one who asks of you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Now, if you're like me, you read that and you kind of go, but if I give to them, are they going to use that money for something good, or are they going to use that money for something good? Right? Are they going to take that out? Is that just drug money for them? Like, I'm just going to help them out. And by me helping them, is that enabling them? And what does that look like? And what if they can't kind of pay it back? Jesus goes, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Those people, give to those people. Love on those people. Give to the one who asked of you. Do not turn away from the one that wants to borrow from you. And then he says this, verse 43. He says, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. And what Jesus starts to do here is he starts to kind of challenge a principle that was very common in his day. And he starts out by quoting a scripture that the Jews would have recognized and understood. Remember, they had the law that was given them by Moses. And in fact, at one point, Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment in all of Scripture was. And he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Everyone understood that as Jews. And we should love those people that are our neighbors. For them, that meant we should love other Jews. We should love people that are like us, that look like us, that believe like us, that smell like us, and sound like us, and talk like us. We should love those people. But as an extrapolation of that teaching, what he says is, this is what you have heard. Love your neighbor, that's a part of the law, and hate your enemy. This was not a part of the law. This was the teachings of the day that Jesus lived in, and the idea was this: if I love my neighbor, then I have to hate my enemy. Because to love my neighbor properly means that I don't love, don't help, don't engage those people that want to kill us, that want to hurt us. In a world where life has no value and it's us or them, we're going to hate them and love our neighbor. Are you tracking with me? That's kind of the extrapolation of it. Now, what's interesting is as I think about that as an ancient principle in the ancient world, I go, that's really not all that different than the way that we kind of operate today. So a research professor at the University of Houston by the name of Brene Brown has written a book recently called Braving the Wilderness. And in that book, she talks about creating community. She talks about the sense of belonging, what it takes to belong or to fit in, and the subtle nuances between the two. And as she gets to the end of the book, she points out something that I think is kind of intuitive if we were just kind of think about it. She said, really, what draws us together and what clumps us together and what separates us into our different groups is not what we agree with each other on, not what we stand for, not what we love together, but what we hate. She said, really, what joins us as groups together, and not real community, by the way, she says it's false community when it's joined together this way, is by a common hatred. We have a common enemy. And so we clump up together and talk about how much we dislike that other group. And you can fill into the blank as to what that other group may be. I'll give you a hopefully funny example. So when we moved here to Northwest Tennessee, we were moving from the state of Alabama. And I sat in with the search team as they were looking. Folks like Kelly Powers and Matt Riley and some others were on that team. And we're sitting around a table talking with one another. And they asked a question. They know I'm coming from Alabama. And so they go, well, listen, we know you're coming from Alabama. Who do you pull for in college football? Because that's an important question when you're looking for a prospective pastor. And so they asked me that. And I go, well, I'm an Auburn fan. And they go, yeah, they made a statement similar to that. We were just, somebody moved on the front row. Anyway, I'm an Auburn fan. And they're like, just a little bit. And I go, whoa, time out. We have common ground. They're like, what's that? You're Tennessee fans, right? Yeah, we're Tennessee fans. We can all agree to hate Alabama. Like, that's it. We can all agree that we don't like Alabama. And immediately the whole search team was like, yeah, you're right. Like, we're good. Because listen, what binds us together is not by what we love, not by what we agree with, but what we hate. And that's the way it was in the ancient world too, right? We're gonna love our neighbors, sure. But we're gonna hate our enemies. And that's what's gonna kind of draw us together. Now what Jesus does is he says, that's what you've heard. Then he makes this statement. Look at verse 44. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. Now, I don't want us to miss this, because I think sometimes we do. Because we know who Jesus is. We know that he's the Son of God. But when he starts this segment, you've heard this, but I say. I need you to understand how offensive that is. Basically what he's saying is this. Everything that you've ever heard before, all the rabbis, all the teachers, all the people that have interpreted the law for you as to mean love your neighbor and hate your enemy, they're wrong. And if you're there and you're a teacher, or you're a rabbi, or you're a prophet, whatever it was that was standing there when Jesus was talking, and he says, "But I say," he's immediately going, "You're wrong." And that's incredibly offensive. And then Jesus says, "You should love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Now, real quick, just a side note. From time to time, this happens. Someone will come to me. This hasn't happened here so much as it has in the past. They come to me and they go, "Listen, Pastor Jeremy," they'll call me. I really want to get deep. I really wish there was just some deeper teaching that you could do on Sunday. Just want to get really deep. And what they mean by that, they have good hearts and good intentions. What you really mean by that, when you say, "I want more deep," is you really mean, "I want more confusing." That's what you really mean, right? I want more confusing. And so my standard response to that, years ago, became this. I would take them to this passage of Scripture, and I would show it to them, and I would go, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. As soon as we figure this out, come back and we'll do some more deep." Right? Because this is so difficult. This is so incredibly hard. Jesus says, listen, we're going to turn the way you think upside down. We're going to love our enemies. Pray for those who persecute. Now, when I hear that, here's where I kind of go. I think about the most extreme. I think of people that if they were to be here in this room, they would want to kill us. Right? I think about ISIS. I think about terrorists. I think about men that take guns and walk into churches and kill people indiscriminately. That's what I think about, right? When I think about my enemies. But let's just be honest for a minute. That is who Jesus is talking about, and we don't need to just push that out of our minds. But for the most of us, none of us, in fact, I won't say none of us, most of us in this room here today have never come into contact face to face with terrorists that wanted to kill us. We've experienced it. We've watched it on TV. We've heard the news reports, and they're very real. And there are Christians that are being murdered every day by these people. I in no way want to minimize that. But for you and me, that's a little easy for us to say, yes, we're going to pray for those terrorists. We should. We're going to pray for them. But because we haven't come into contact with them. You with me? Because we haven't seen them. Here's where this kind of hits me, and here's where I want it to kind of hit us. I want you to imagine for just a minute that person in your life that is just out to get you. That person in your life that regardless of what it is you do, you can't do anything right. It's that teacher that you've got that no matter how hard you try, you're not going to be able to get the good grade. It's that parent of the student in your class that no matter how much you communicate, no matter how many helps you give to their kids, it's not going to be enough, and they're still going to be mad, they're still going to be mean with the principal. They're still out to get you. It's that coach. It's that coach that regardless of how good you are, they're not going to put you in the game. It's that boss, right, that nitpicks and finds everything wrong with you, but doesn't get on to other people in the same way. For some of you, it's your spouse that no matter how hard you try, they're just holding on to bitterness and they're holding on to anger and they won't let go of that and they hold that over your head for forever and ever and ever. It's those. For some of you, it's your parents, right, who have taken away your phone and they put you in your room and how dare you persecute me, whatever it is. Like you're saying, listen, here's the thing. What? I just want you to pick that person and then I want you to go, how would your life be different and how would that relationship be different? And all of a sudden, you started loving them unconditionally and praying for them. See, it's easy for us to talk about an amorphous figure that wants to kill us, and we should pray for that individual as well. But what about those people that are meeting you right where you're at? If you just feel there's nothing you can do, there's out to do, what would it be like? Now, here's what I know about you. Here's what I know about me. The reason that the command for us to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us is so difficult for us is because we don't even pray for our friends. Come on. In fact, when you go and pray, most of us, what you do is you pray for your family. Maybe there's a couple people that you might pray for, that coworker that just got diagnosed with cancer or whatever it may be. You pray for this small circle of people, and outside of that, we don't even pray for people we like. Now God's saying, pray for people that persecute you, love your enemy. That makes it incredibly difficult. When I was growing up in church, I was about 4th or 5th grade. Actually, I know for a fact I was in 5th grade. And at that particular time, we had children's programming for our kids on Sunday nights and Wednesday nights. And we had a bus ministry, which meant that we had like a little 15-passenger bus. We called it the busette. And so we had adults from our church that would load up in the busette, and they would go out into some of the less desirable communities, and there they would just pick up kids. This was back in the day where it was less creepy, I guess, to pull up in a van and be like, "Come on, we got candy." I don't know how they got me into the bus. I don't know. We didn't have waivers signed by parents, none of that. But we just had this bus ministry. And so we drove into the neighborhoods and we picked kids up. And here's the thing: we were a church that was primarily Caucasian. We were primarily middle upper class church, and we would go and we'd get these kids that didn't look like us and didn't smell like us a lot of times, and didn't know how to act in that type of environment, because most of us had kind of grown up in that. And as a result, it was very difficult for those of us as kids trying to figure out how do we incorporate them. There was one little boy. His name was Michael, and Michael just had no idea how to act. Like, this was before we had a bunch of different diagnoses, and so he was like ADD and ADHD. He had all the letters. He had all of them. And he would come to school, he would come to church. He'd get on the bus. He'd come, and we would have kids come and not come, and it wasn't very regular. But Michael was regular. Him and one other little boy named Donnie. They were so regular to church, and he was a struggle for those of us that he was mean, like he was a bully, like he was physical with us in some cases, and he would always cause disruption in class, and to be honest with you, I can remember being 10, 11 years old, like we didn't want to be around Michael, like he didn't know when to speak, and he didn't know when not to speak, and the things he said were not nice, and all those things. And so a group of us got together. The pastor had preached on this particular passage, turning the other cheek and loving your enemy. And I can remember a group of us, there were about 3 or 4 of us in 5th and 6th grade. We got together one Sunday afternoon. I'll never forget this. And we said, listen, we should do an experiment. That was exactly the way we said. We should do an experiment. See if what the preacher was talking about works. The only way we knew how to express it was, let's be nice to Mike. Let's be nice to Mike. Let's just go out of our way, right, to love him. And what Scripture said, what our pastor says, if we love him, then that's what we're supposed to do. So let's just see what happens. It's just an experiment. And so that particular Sunday evening or Wednesday evening, I don't remember when it was, we got permission to go out on the busette with him to pick up kids in the community. And so there's 3 or 4 of us, and Mike gets on, and he comes in, just like you'd expect. He comes in, and he's spouting off at us, and he's kind of physical with us, and that kind of stuff. He was into martial arts and that sort of stuff. And he sits down, and all of a sudden, all of us, we didn't tell Mike we were doing this. We just started talking to him. We just engaged him in conversation. Hey, tell me what you like. Tell me what does he do. We found out that at that point he was involved with martial arts, and so we began kind of communicating with him. We invited him to come sit with us that evening when we were in class, and we didn't stop for the weeks that followed. We were just like, let's just see what happens. And I'll be honest with you, the moment we got off the bus, things were different. Now, Michael still was learning. He still didn't quite know how to interact well with other people. He was still didn't look like us or smell like us or act like us. He didn't do any things, but his attitude towards us changed. It was remarkable. And all of a sudden, once we kind of invited him in, he now stopped being aggressive toward us. He now stopped being antagonistic towards us. He was more careful with the things that he said. And you want to know what's really cool about Mike? He stuck with us all the way through high school. And if we were to go today to that church, I'm not making this up, if we were to go to that church and walk in that sanctuary this morning, somewhere in that auditorium, Mike would be sitting with his wife and with his kids in the same church. Now, I don't know that we had anything to do with that, but I am telling you that when you put into practice love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, it not only changes your heart, it has the potential to change the heart of your enemies as well. And Jesus goes, that's what you've been told. This is what I want you to tell, that you might be children of God in heaven. And then he goes on. Then he goes on and he gives us an example. And he says this in the second half of verse 45. He says, He, God, causes His sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Let me tell you what Jesus is getting at here. This is so important for us to understand. This is a uniquely Christian principle. Here it is. You ready? People matter to God whether or not God matters to them. People matter to God whether or not they give a flip about God. Why? Because He made them in His own image. God, He allows the sun to rise on them whether they love Him or not. He sends the rain on their crops whether they love Him or not. And what Jesus is challenging us to do is to be like God. To be like God and to love people, whether they love us or not. And to love people, whether they love God or not. And to love people, whether they look or act like us or not. He goes on to really kind of challenge us. This is really salt in the wound, what Jesus is saying right here. Look at verse 46. He says this, if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Now, we don't understand these phrases sometimes in our society, this tax collectors, pagans. But we have tax collectors, and we don't necessarily care for the IRS. We come April every year, but it's not the same. So what I want you to do is I want you to picture the group, and you can. It's going to be different for all of you. Picture the group that just you don't really like very much. If you think that group is just nasty, I don't want to deal with them, right? They're mean, that group. Picture that group. And it could be a political party. It could be anything. It doesn't matter, okay? Whatever it may be. Pick that group. I imagine that even they, as bad as we think they probably are nice to the people that are nice to them. And they probably are nice to the people that believe like them and think like them and act like them, right? Let me tell you what Jesus is getting at. He says, do not even tax collectors do that. Don't even the pagans do that. This is what he's saying. You ready? You're no better than them. That's what they do. You're no better than them. And I'm not asking you to be like them. I'm asking you to be like God. And that is completely different. That is something that's brand new. That is a uniquely Christian principle that up until this point in time had never, ever existed. He said, if you greet those people that greet you, then you're no better off with God in your life. Because even people that don't have God in their life do that. Last year, actually for the last few years and coming up here in a couple weeks, we have an opportunity to do the same thing. The Ministerial Association of Bryan County participates in and actually organizes and runs the feeding of the 5,000 here in Union City. In fact, some of you all will be a part of it this year, and I'm excited. What Feeding of 5,000 is, essentially, is we hope to prepare 1,500 food baskets that we'll distribute to those that just need a little bit of extra help at Thanksgiving time out in the community. We'll distribute those all over the county. And in addition to that, we will serve about 500 people a hot meal, turkey and ham and dressing and mashed potatoes. And I'm hungry just talking about it. It's really amazing food. And we'll serve them this year just like we have every other year. And last year, I was there the entire time, and I'll tell you something that I thought was kind of interesting. Volunteers from churches come out of the woodwork, and I'm so thankful for that. I'm so thankful that Crosswind Church is going to be a part of it this year. In just a minute, I'll tell you how you can be a part of that coming up here in the next week or so. But what I found was that the place that people wanted to serve the most was in the kitchen. Because in the kitchen, I don't have to go interact with the people. In the kitchen, I get to be with people that are a lot like me, that are already in church, right? That have similar backgrounds to me. And so even if I'm not going to be in the kitchen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of clump up in what I call a little holy huddle over here, and we're going to serve tea, or we're going to do these certain things, or we're going to clean up. But when it comes to like interacting with the folks that are sitting at the table, having a hot meal, there wasn't a whole lot of that. And listen, if Jesus were to look at that, let me tell you what he would say. Listen, you don't have to love Jesus to do that. Even people that don't love Jesus hang out with those people that look like them and smell like them and sound like them and act like them. That's not a Christian value. If you want to be like your Heavenly Father, then not only do you serve, you're going to engage. You're going to greet. You're going to have conversations. You're going to look at people in the eye that are different than you on so many levels. And you're going to ascribe value to them. Not because of the color of their skin, and not because of their socioeconomic level, and not because of their country of origin, but because they are made in the image of God. And so this year for Feeding of 5,000, I'm so pumped. We've made just a little bit of change. In fact, some of you are going to want to be a part of this. What we decided is we want to intentionally put people at the tables to engage these folks in conversation. And so the meal starts at 5 p.m. on the 12th, or not the 12th, this is the 12th, on the Tuesday, not this Tuesday, the next Tuesday. And at 4 o'clock, the meal starts at 5. At 4 o'clock, we're going to offer some training for people. And it's funny that we should have to train you how to do it, but we want you to know this is how you engage in a conversation with somebody, right? This is how you talk to somebody. And by the way, if the opportunity comes up, then man, let's tell them about Jesus. Let's tell them about why it is that we're serving them. It's not because we're trying to get some kind of guilty conscience off of us or whatever it is. Well, we just want to love them because God loves them. Whether that God matters to them or not, they matter to God. That's so remarkable. And yet what Jesus says is, listen, all the time we just engage people that are just like us. But even pagans do that. Even tax collectors do that. No. You need to engage people. Serve people. Love people. Pray for people. Even the ones that are out to get you. He finishes with a verse that really would have been offensive. Verse 48, he says this. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. I grew up in church. I'm not going to fall for this with Jesus. You see, I know that there's nobody perfect. Jesus is the only perfect one. I can't be perfect. Jesus goes, I know I'm not asking you to be sinless here. I'm not asking you to be sinless. That's not what Jesus is saying here. He's saying this. When it comes to this context, when it comes to loving others, when it comes to loving your enemy, praying for those that persecute you, when it comes to engaging people that are different than you, even the ones that are out to get you, when it comes to ascribing value to people, whether or not God matters to them or not, in that way, you can be perfect like your Heavenly Father. In that way, you can be like God. In fact, what Jesus is going is that we're going to totally redefine what it means to be godly. We're going to redefine what it means to be godly. I grew up, I told you, I'm so blessed to have grown up in church, and every now and then we come across one of these people. and my parents would say, or adults in the church would say, that individual is just so godly. That individual is just so holy. I love, the way he prays, the way she teaches, the way that they're just so godly. And I can just remember, full disclosure, I can remember being a little boy looking at them going, that's what godly is. That looks boring, right? Like I don't know that I want that, right? And I should, I know, but that's just, I just thought about, what, is that really it? And when Jesus goes, yeah, listen, we should strive to be perfect, we should strive to be sinless. That should be our goal, right? Holiness is ultimately the goal that we're shooting for. But there is an area of your life in where Jesus defines godliness as something that can be attained by us. It's something that we can grab a hold of. And it is in the way that we treat other people, the way that we engage other people, the way that we love our enemies, and pray for those who persecute us, regardless of what it is they can give us, regardless of whether or not they believe like us, simply because they're made in the image of God, and therefore they're valuable. Be perfect, he says, as your Heavenly Father is perfect. So what I want to encourage you to do is this. I want you to encourage you to be like God. I want to encourage you to be like Christ. This week, I want to encourage you to go and to serve. This week, our goal is to unleash a wave of generosity with our volunteer hours. And so for weeks, we've been asking your home group leaders to be thinking about places where they can go and serve. And so if your home group leader has not talked to you about that already, this week is the week to talk to them about where can we go and serve. Maybe it's as a part of the feeding of the 5,000. If you want to know about those times you can serve for that, you can check out our Facebook page. We have events set up for all of the particular times that that you can go and sign up. If you are looking for an area to sign up as a home group or just as an individual, we wanted to make it as easy on you as we possibly could, so we created this website, iamcrosswind.com. It's been up for about a year. We really want you to utilize this. We have gone out and spoken to about 24-ish nonprofits, some for-profit organizations that are doing great work with seniors. And we've talked to them. We found out where the contact information is, what people can do if they want to volunteer. And so you can go to iamcrosswind.com, scroll through those organizations, get the contact information, call them up and go, I want to come and I want to volunteer. And our goal is that for every man, woman, and child in our church, they would put in 1 hour of service in these nonprofits. in the week that is ahead. 1 hour goes into the next week. That's fine. We'll count it too. Right? Okay? But our goal is to go, what would happen if we had 350 people in church last week? What happens if we take 350 hours and just pour that into our community? How far does that make an organization go to be able to go farther, faster? How much help would that be to revamp a workspace so that it looks a little bit nicer, is a little bit cleaner, and smells a little bit better? How great would it be to go and sit with seniors and widows and just invest some time in them? How awesome would it be to go and to serve a meal to somebody that's hungry, or to pack a bag for somebody that needs food, or to go serve at a local food pantry? I don't care where it is. I just want you to take the gifts and abilities that God has given you, and the next couple of weeks go, I'm just going to throw that back into my community. I'm just going to pour back into them. And here's where my agenda is. I want to see a wave of generosity in the next couple of weeks from Crosswind Church. But do you want to know what I hope is it happens even more so? I hope that when you go and volunteer with these organizations, I hope that some of you fall in love with them. I hope some of you walk away going, that's why I'm here. That's my purpose. And my volunteerism in this organization doesn't end when Be Rich ends. Be Rich was the beginning of my involvement with this organization. So that lives won't be transformed just for this month while we're doing this. But they'll be transformed for the days that are ahead as we strive to be like our Heavenly Father. Now, here's how you can help me. We want to know where you're serving. And we want to know how you're serving. So out at our Welcome Center, there's cards that if you're going to serve as an individual, if you're going to serve as a home group, you can take that card and fill that out, drop it back off in the Welcome Center so we know where you serve and how many hours you serve. If that is a little too analog for you, you can go to our church app, go to the Google store or the App Store and search I Am Crosswind and download our Crosswind Church app. Click on the Connect button, and there you can log your serve hours there. So that when we come together in the weeks that are ahead, we can celebrate what God has done in and through Crosswind Church. And take a selfie. Or better yet, take an unselfie. Out in the foyer, we have little signs that say "Give, Serve, Love" with little popsicle sticks on it. Take it, cover your face, because it's not about us getting the credit, right? It's about God getting all the credit. Take that, cover your face, snap a selfie, hashtag I Am Crosswind, hashtag Give, Serve, Love, so that we can find all of those pictures and go invest in our community. Now, here's the thing. I just want to say this in word. Can you imagine the impact that we could have on our community if we were just willing to step out and go, you know what? You have value. Not because of who you are, not because of your last name, not because of the neighborhood that you're born in, not because of the language that you speak or the color of your skin. Because you're made in the image of God. How much benefit the kingdom of God can be done if we are willing to do that? Let me pray for us. God, thank you so much that people matter to you, whether or not you matter to them. And God, as we go this week and try to engage our community by serving in your name, I pray that we would be like you, that we would seek to be perfect in this realm as you are perfect, that we would love those regardless of whether they love us, that we would greet those regardless of whether they greet us, that we would pray for those that are out to get us and love even our enemies. God, that's so incredibly difficult, but I'm reminded, God, that that's exactly what you did. The Bible tells us that while we were still sinners, while we were enemies of you, you sent your Son to die on the cross on my behalf. So God, help us to be like you. Help us to engage this world in your name, for your sake, and for your glory. And may you get all of the credit. And may you get all of the praise. Thank you for using us to accomplish your will for this city, for this region. We love you. We trust you. For all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Thank you for coming this week. We'll see you next time.